Hi guys. There's a very famous old story about the great Northern Irish and Manchester United footballer George Best, who was one of the great players of his age. Best was famously a great playboy and then tragically died of the effects of alcoholism. Um, but there's a great story where Best had left Manchester United and his great playing days were over. And he returned from the casino and he got back into his hotel and there, draped across the hotel room bed was several £1,000s that he just want to get one in the casino, and Miss World lying there in her thin negligee. And Best sent down for champagne, and the room man comes up, knocks on the door, does the business, and then looks at George Best and goes, "George, where did it all go wrong?" The question I'm asking about Supermac, where did it all go wrong? Or in other words, the Conservatives, why did you lose? There's a little bit of that story to it, because if you think about it, they damn nearly didn't lose in '64. And, truth be told, um, they had 13 years in power and would return to power 6 years later. Nonetheless, we've got to start with some observations. And the first is that all prime ministers have sell-by dates. In fact, if you look at the 20th century, modern politics, if you like, in the 21st century, most prime ministers don't actually last that long. My lifetime has been a bit of an exception in some ways because I had the two real long runners, which is Blair and Thatcher. But truth be told, most prime ministers have a fairly short sell-by date. And Macmillan, if you take a period of continuous office rather than like Baldwin where he's in and out, Macmillan is, I think I'm right saying, the third longest serving, or was it fourth, longest serving of the prime ministers. Fourth, I think it is. Okay? Yeah, because it's Thatcher, Blair, Asquith, then Macmillan. What happens is, to be honest with you, the longer you're in office, the more enemies you make. So there is a time limiting fact in that. And the shine often comes off. People, frankly, get a bit sick of it. And your luck will often run out. And then it can be like love. What you fall in love with then repels you. So what the people really liked about Macmillan to start with becomes something they didn't like about him by the end. I think that's probably true, by the way. And there's one really big thing, especially if you're a Tory. Up until '97, when the Tory party went mad, the Tories didn't like losers. They dropped losers like a stone. Now, I think they've possibly gone back to that, actually. I think some of the recent history might indicate that. But certainly in the period we've been thinking about, where people who lose or look like they're going to, which was the case with Macmillan, are always in trouble. Macmillan, like all PMs, was a mixture of both very secure and insecure. Macmillan gave this, sort of souciant air at the top, but Macmillan got to the top using sharp elbows, wielding the knife, as it were. He famously once said there were no such thing as friends at the top. When he became Prime Minister, he feared he might only last 6 weeks. And he got there by the use of some very sharp elbows against Rab Butler and against Eden, and then against Butler again, I think, as well. And he shows that when he becomes Prime Minister. Butler's given the Home Office, not a good gig for a naturally reforming Tory. Okay, because the Tory party this year was full of hangers and floggers and don't like foreigners as anti-immigrant feeling and all that. Butler's natural instincts were reformist. He'd pilot through in the end the 1957 Homicide Act that Gwilym Lloyd George had actually first put forward, that got rid of the death penalty for most kinds of murder. So it was a natural fit there. And what that meant is, Butler would always be getting up the back of the right wing of the Conservative Party, and that, I think, Macmillan thought would keep Butler busy, if you like, but also weaken his position. The three ministers who he knew had been loyal to Butler were all booted upstairs to the Lords, which is a very Macmillan thing to do. And it's not as if everything's stable. Think about it. In 1958, his Chancellor resigns, as do his two junior ministers. Macmillan calls it a little local difficulty. It bloody well wasn't. It was it was a proper political crisis. You can imagine the heat and like that would generate. And the other thing to remember about Macmillan was he's very different from the public image of Macmillan. His grandson talked about Macmillan's black dog, his bouts of depression. He was quite a fretful character. He was also very suspicious, of others doing what he did, basically using the sharp elbows and wielding the knife, to mix the metaphors. The other thing to recognise is that, because they win elections, right? So, we know they win 51, 55, 59, nearly win 64. So we think, well, they should have been bloody confident all the time. Well, the truth is they weren't. And the reason was, quite a bit of the time, they're not actually winning. Labour have poll leads for much of this period: 52, 53, 54, smallish ones, 56 smallish, 57, 58, first half of, anyway, big ones. By 62, 62, had a whopping great big poll leads. I mean, as high as 20% at one point. And Labour were winning by-elections: 57, 58, they win 4 from the Tories; 62 to 64, they win 6. And whereas Labour had a really bad moment after their defeat in 59, where they lurched to the left, embraced unilateral nuclear disarmament. I'll talk about this more another time. By 61, the Labour leader, Hugh Gaitskell, had got his party back in his grasp. He talked about fight, fight, fight for the party I love, and he did, and he won. Now, Gaitskell is often regarded by many Labour people, I'm probably one of them, as one of the great prime ministers we never had. Okay, the lost leader in many ways. Wilson is more controversial, but the fact remains Wilson was probably the best opposition leader of these times. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about 64 in a second. So, that's definitely true. And even the Liberals were on the comeback trail. I think at 55, they got 2% at one point. By 56, they got a new leader, Joe Grimman. By 58, they're back at over 10% in the polls. There's a little dip. But then famously, in 62, they had amazing year. They got as high as 21% in May and June. And they win a by-election at Orpington, one of the safest Conservative seats in the country, with a swing of 23% and a majority of nearly 8,000. That's the Eric Lubbock I've mentioned before. So I think there was politically, the Conservatives were never quite as strong as they appear if you look at it casually. And the Conservatives have real policy issues as well. The economy is not ticking along beautifully in the early 60s. We've got Selwyn Lloyd's pay pause. Well, that's really unpopular with public sector workers, many of whom at this period were Conservatives. I said to my lot the other day, amazingly at this time, Labour didn't really get many votes off teachers and doctors, for example. Then there was the sterling crisis, and of course unemployment was spiking through 62, 63. Then there was the issue of Europe. In 62, Macmillan saw kind of Europe as an ace in the hole, a political ace in the hole, a way of reorientating his government. I'll give you a proper quote about this in a second. Rab Butler, famously indiscreet, told the journalist, the engine had fallen out of the entire government strategy when Macmillan said no, when Britain was not allowed to enter the EC. And I think that does tell us something quite important. For Macmillan was the game changer. Right? It was to give him a new approach in the government, to re-put the shine on the government. Just what you do with the government, you try and refresh. Okay, well, the refreshment hadn't worked. Butler also told the young Wedgie Ben, it was a much bigger shock for us than you chaps realised. Patrick Cosgrave, Tory journalist. Britain and Macmillan had been, quote, humiliated in the eyes of the world. And, quote, the EEC application had, quote, represented Macmillan's only hope of breaking out a cycle of decline at home. Michael Fraser, head of the Conservative Research Department. Now, he's saying this in hindsight, looking back a few years later, but I think it's actually very persuasive and very telling. Europe was to be our deus ex machina. It was to create a new contemporary political argument with insular socialism, dish the Liberals by stealing their clothes, give us something new, act as the catalyst of modernisation, give us a new place in the international sun. It was Macmillan's ace, and de Gaulle trumped it. The Conservatives never recovered. Then there was other issues. There were riots in 58, the immigration issue beset them, the 62 Commonwealth Immigrants Act, arguments over education. We now think, well, the nuclear thing was smooth as anything. It wasn't actually. Britain created its own nuclear missile system, Blue Streak, didn't work. I imagine for Skybolt, the American one didn't work, had to opt for Polaris in the end. There was the whole business of reorientating with America, what we call the winds of change. The end of empire was very unpopular with some Conservatives. especially those with close connections to South Africa or to Rhodesia, modern-day Zimbabwe. So for all the Conservatives' underlying strengths that we've talked about a lot, there were, I think, also some serious political issues. And then we come to the politics of the dog years. There is an era in which Macmillan was past his sell-by date, I think, by 63. The shine had come off the chaps as well for reasons that we've looked at before, related to scandal, Profumo, Cambridge spies, etc. In many ways, the political centrepiece of Macmillan's last years is what we call the Night of the Long Knives, when in July 62, Macmillan decided to reshuffle. The plan was he was going to sack his Chancellor that autumn, Selwyn Lloyd. And he was damaged goods, Selwyn Lloyd, by now. Unpopular papers, unemployment rising. So why not sack the Chancellor? Chancellor takes the blame, lightning rod, and someone else can come in. But the problem is he made the mistake of discussing this with Rab Butler, who characteristically leaked the story to the Daily Mail. So Macmillan decided to act there and then and sack Lloyd, and in doing so, sacked a total of 7 cabinet ministers and a lot of juniors too. I mean, watch the programme at the foot of this because it's brilliant. But, famously, Lord Kirmuir, the Lord Chancellor, remarked that he wouldn't treat his cook like this. Macmillan replied, good cooks are so hard to get. Implication being good Lord Chancellors and two of any. It got the name of the Light of the Long Knives. And instead of making the government look decisive, well, the nicknames do it all. Mac the Knife, or Super Macbeth. He looked panicked, disloyal, or both. One Liberal quipped, "Greater love hath no man than this," then he lay down his friends for his life. Hugh Gatesall said it was the act of a desperate man in a desperate situation. Add to that, Macmillan's health wasn't great. And when he had signs of prostate cancer, which, by the way, he lived on well into the 80s, he decided to resign. Truth is, I think he was past his sell-by date by then. The Conservatives used the old magic circle, not elected yet, went for the safe pair of hands in some ways. The problem was the major contenders for the job were all seen as dodgy in their own ways. Rab Butler was seen as really not quite there, not up to it anymore. Lord Hailsham was seen as unreliable. He was, by the way. The upshot is Hume gets selected as leader. The problem with Hume is he's a very decent man, I think undoubtedly so, but he looks like the same mould as before, because he was, one of the greatest landowners in the country, for God's sake. So, Hume is appointed leader. Now, one of the problems with Hume is that, he wasn't a natural on TV. Let's put it that way. Famously, a makeup lady was once asked by him if she could make him look better on telly. And she said, "No, sorry, I can't." And he said, "Why not?" And she said, "Well, you've got a head like a skull." And Hume says, "But doesn't everyone have a head like a skull?" And she says, "No." His wife reckoned his trademark horn-rimmed glasses cost him the election, making him look toffish and upstanding. The problem was that he's up against Harold Wilson. Now, Wilson was witty, incisive in the Commons. He wasn't always been witty. He's one of the few men I've ever come across, historically could learn to be witty. He was good on TV, he had a modernising, upbeat message, a carefully projected man of the people image, very much contrasting with Hume's grouse moors and, landowner. Now, actually, Hume proves to be pretty much effective in many ways. As I say, they damn nearly win in 64. But the truth is they don't. And I think the reason for that is the gap in 62-63 was too big to come back from unless Labour made a mess of it. And they didn't. By polling day, a Labour score had been high as 50%, was reduced to 44%, hardly more than 59%. What beats the Conservatives is actually the Liberals. Hume polls 43%, but the Liberals get 11%, and they have more candidates running this time, and that's just enough to sneak Labour their tiny majority of 4. So, the chaps were gone. The following year, Hume resigns to be replaced by Heath. Wilson will go to the country in 66 and win big. For many people, I think around 1966, it kind of looks as though the old days of the Conservatives were long gone. Well, we've got historical long vision. We know it's not. Many of those toffs will still serve under Thatcher, Major, and then the sons or grandsons, more accurately, of toffs would make a comeback large time by the time we come to David Cameron and, of course, Boris Johnson now. Meanwhile, Macmillan's toffs were history.